Dr. Ifland has been creating breakthroughs in recovery from food addiction since 1999 with her first popular book, and she has her second book here that she published in 2018, her textbook, Processed Food Addiction, Foundations, Assessment, and Recovery, released by CRC Press. So actually I'll pass this around in case anyone wants to take a look. She founded the Online Addiction Reset Community in 2016, the Facebook group Food Addiction Education and Food Addiction Resources in 2014 that provides free support. The Home Addiction Reset Program, HARP, is the first online live video program for food addiction withdrawal that was started in 2018. And Dr. Ifland's Meal Prep Manual is a breakthrough system to easily manage foods. That was also started in 2018. Dr. Ifland is the lead author of the first scholarly description of processed food addiction and the definition of addictive foods. Dr. Ifland earned her PhD in addictive nutrition at Union Institute and University, her MBA at Stanford Business School, and her BA in economics and political science at Oberlin College. She currently resides in Seattle. Dr. Ifland told me before we started today that this is what she thinks is the first lecture of food addiction ever to medical students. So this is a landmark and stepping stone event, so hopefully more of these to come. Dr. Ifland, everybody.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Nutrition Club, for inviting me. I am thrilled to be here. I would like to tell you a little bit about my story before we start. I started on this journey, well, I didn't know it at the time, but I really started at conception. I knew I was on this journey starting in 1996 when I tried to solve a yo-yo dieting problem by giving up sugars and flours. And I was in for a series of just incredible shocks. Cravings went away, sinus infections went away, bloating went away, I was losing 2 pounds a week, and then in the 3rd week I had a real epiphany. I had had a lifelong problem with anger. I grew up in an angry household. I thought it might be learned behavior, but in that 3rd week of January 1996, the anger started to go away. And I would have thought I was crazy, except I have a support group. And they said, yes, yes, when people get off of sugars and flours, they tend to become less irritable. I was, of course, shocked. I had a long-time therapist. I talked to her about it. She said, well, maybe it's like alcoholism. Dang. So that was the moment. That was the moment in which I adopted food addiction recovery as a career. And I thought, everybody has the right to know about this. And I'm going to start telling people. Well, I started out with a handout. That was totally ineffective. A list of unprocessed foods, nobody knew what to do with it or how to implement it. So I said, well, I'll write an instructional book. I wrote a book called Sugars and Flours, How They Make Us Crazy, Sick, and Fat, and What to Do About It. It was great. It was Amazon top 3% book for 10 years, and PBS Houston did a lot of work around it, and it did not start a movement. It didn't do what I wanted to have happen, which was to have everybody know that processed foods do this. They're profoundly mood-altering substances. So I said, well, maybe I could teach the teachers. And I went back and I got my PhD, and the only school in the world I could go to was Union Institute in Cincinnati, because it's a school for new fields. So I have a PhD in interdisciplinary studies with a specialization in addictive nutrition. That is my degree. Now, am I a nutritionist? No. I could not prescribe a supplement to save my life. I am really an addictionist. I put myself much more over here with the people who are dealing with alcoholism. So that was great. And I had another idea. I said, well, maybe I could start a prepared meal company. And then I can just give people the food, they'll see how much better they feel, and, well, it was too expensive. It did not catch fire. So what I did learn from that is that everybody, virtually everybody, people I didn't expect to have a big reaction to clean, what I call clean food, would, but we had a law firm across the street from our shop, a high-end law firm, with, like, you know, tippy-top of their class kind of students, in this law firm, and they had a reaction. So they would talk to me at the end of the first week and say, wow, I'm thinking more clearly, I have more energy, I'm not having that mid-morning and mid-afternoon dip. Do you think this is about the food? And I'm not thinking about food, my cravings are gone. I did not expect to find evidence for food addiction in that very, very high-functioning person, but there it was. So that was valuable. The processed food, free meals did not work in terms of creating a whole trend. They were too expensive, just wasn't the right thing. And then CRC Press came along and said, why don't you write a textbook for us? And I said, great, I would love to do that. I spent 3 years at a desk looking at thousands of studies. I wrote about 70% of the book, and I got really high caliber people to contribute the other chapters. I got one really, really big thing out of the textbook writing, which is, this is not just a garden variety addiction. This is a really bad addiction. It's a really severe addiction. It's a lot of different substances. It activates all the craving pathways in the brain. It starts at conception. It never lets up. There's a very aggressive food industry going after small children. And the pounding of the cueing and the triggering is really relentless. So that is when I got the idea, finally, for something that would work reliably. So I was not interested in something that would work 20% of the time, or 50% of the time, or 30% of the time. I wanted something that if I said to a person, sign up for this program, show up for this, that they would get control of their food. And I did finally find that. Last year I beta tested a program called the Addiction Reset Community, and I'm going to tell you why it worked. But let's do our homework. Let's get to the beginning. We're going to talk about a shift that happened in the United States that has flummoxed approaches to recovery from overeating. And because you're going to find out about the shift, you are going to learn, you're just going to be cutting edge. In 1 hour, you're going to be cutting edge. So here's the deal. Pre-1980, we ate food. But post-1980s, we were inundated with processed, addictive food-like substances. So 30 years later, here we are. What are we actually dealing with out there with our clients? Are we addressing an eating problem, or are we addressing an addiction? And here's how to think about this. So if you have a cocaine addict, you would never say, oh, they have a snorting disorder. No, you wouldn't say that. If you had a smoker, you wouldn't say, oh, they have a breathing disorder. You wouldn't say that. And so that is the idea for what we're going to talk about today, which is, I don't think people have a problem with eating. I think they have an addiction. So today in this presentation, we're going to talk about 6 topics. What is the addiction epidemic model? Who spreads addiction? What is the impact on the brain? And what do we do about it? And most importantly, as you all are face-to-face with overeaters, this will be the most common, I think, this will be the most common problem presented to you in your careers. Just ask yourself, why is this person here? And why have they tried typically 20 things? And people say to me, 20 things? Oh my goodness, I try something new every day. So why do we have people who have tried and tried and tried, and they're desperate, and they're trying hard? Why do they not succeed? And then how can you take advantage of this situation and be a winner? So let's talk about the model, the industrial addiction model. You all heard, I have an MBA. I've been interested in business solutions to health problems for 23 years. So what happened in the 1980s? Well, the tobacco industry moved into processed foods. R.G.R. Reynolds into Nabisco, Philip Morris, General Foods, Kraft Foods. within a very short time, tobacco controlled a big portion of the processed food industry. Remember that tobacco was being kicked out of tobacco in those years. The court findings started to fall against the tobacco companies. They were losing their markets. So these tobacco executives are masters of the addiction epidemic model. They brought us the smoking epidemic. They brought us the tobacco epidemic. They know how to do it, and they are fearless and ruthless. So pretty soon they were applying this modern industrial epidemic of addiction model to processed foods. And soon millions of people were no longer eating. They were addicted. So you see the shift there? They go back to tobacco. People stopped breathing. No, they didn't. But they started breathing in smoke. So it wasn't a breathing issue. It was a nicotine issue. And that's what happened to us around food. So what is the model? First, you have to teach the brain to crave. You do this by addictive product formulation. Tobacco was soaked in sugar to make it more addictive and more inhalable. So this is an industry that is used to formulating products to be addictive specifically. You lay on lots of advertising. We're going to look at some stunning numbers about TV advertising. And you go to the youngest age person you can possibly get. None of you are my age, right? So you probably don't know about the Joe Camel cartoons, the cartoons that were aimed at 11 and 12-year-old boys, Camel cigarettes. Anybody know about that campaign? Tragically effective. You could get really young boys to be interested in cigarettes because it was paired with sex and cars and a camel. And then you remove barriers to use. So you remove the cost barrier and the availability barrier. So you can always get your hands on it and you can always afford it. Cigarettes started out as a nickel a pack, right? And the reason why that epidemic was able to flourish is because of rolling machines. So before rolling machines, you had people sitting in factories literally hand rolling cigarettes, and they were too expensive. But once you got rolling machines, you could drop that price down to a nickel a pack. Enough people could afford to buy it often enough to teach the brain to crave. So you see how this is coming together. Now let's look at some examples. Tobacco, marketing to teenagers. Alcohol, marketing to teenage girls. So this is happening in Canada right now. There's an epidemic of teenage girl drinking. And pharmaceuticals, marketing to doctors, marketing opiates to doctors. And now we have tobacco marketing processed foods to children. So what are we doing here? What we are doing, what these neuromarketers are doing is they are hijacking brain functions so that you are craving processed foods all the time, all the time, all the time. And what we're going to be talking about today, how do you re-hijack those neurons so that people are thinking about recovery, recovery, recovery all the time? Pretty cool stuff. So here are some examples. How does it work? 52% corn syrup and sugar in infant formula, your youngest possible consumer. Cereal for toddlers, 40%, all the way up to 70% sugar in cereals. Co-opting idols to gain children's trust. Putting toys in. Do you all know that San Francisco has explicitly banned the practice of putting toys into children's meals? Television. So television is the biggie. Television. So when we look at the number of Saturday morning cartoon ads for sugary, fatty, salty foods, and we start in 1987, when the tobacco industry is coming into processed foods, we see that there are about 160 ads per Saturday morning. That's already a lot. But within 5 years, it's 264. And within a couple of years after that, it's 564. So this is a lot of commercials. In a very wonderful study researchers took groups of toddlers. Half of them were shown a 1-hour program with 5 commercials, and the other half were shown the same 1-hour program with no commercials. Put all the toddlers in a room with lots of different products. The children who saw 5 commercials went for the products in those commercials. The children who had not seen the commercials picked a lot of different things. It only takes 5 commercials to influence a toddler. And here they are being exposed to 500 commercials in one morning. Now, could this have been a factor, really? Well, you look at Nickelodeon, which carried those commercials into 65 million households. So yes, this could have been a factor. It lines up. What happens then in the 10 years after that to obesity rates in children? So we're looking again at the genesis of obesity. We see that in the period of 88 to 94, 10% prevalence. It goes up to 15% prevalence within 10 years. A 50% increase. And these obese children are not the children who are developing food addiction, because you can certainly have food addiction without having obesity. You're just pre-obesogenic. Or you can be the kind of person who doesn't collect fat tissue under the skin. You might collect it around your organs. So that's not going to show up as obesity. These are just the 50% obese children. So how else does it work at grocery stores? Availability and advertising. 60% of food purchase decisions are made after the person enters the store. That's due to intense triggering, and we'll see how that works in the brain. It's very available in vending machines and on the road, in convenience stores, and in workplaces. So when I started out in the corporate world 40 years ago, nobody ever ate anything in a meeting. The only thing that, if you're really macho, you could have in a meeting was coffee. Nobody drank water, nobody drank tea. That was a sign of weakness. And you would certainly not eat anything in a meeting. And now I understand that you can't hold a meeting and get anybody to come unless you take their coffee orders and you have something really ooey-gooey in there. And then this constant availability in break rooms, so the people sitting at their desk are being provoked into dopamine releases all day long. Schools, fast food invasions of schools has been quite tragic. And then coffee shops. So you see this proliferation of coffee shops. Here we are at Hong Kong University. And this is a very, very interesting picture. So these people are standing in line in the rain. They're on a university campus. They're probably going to school. So instead of spending that 20 or 30 minutes learning, studying, getting ready for class, visiting, talking, they're serving an addiction. So the coffee, sugar, dairy addiction has got them rooted in place. They're not going anywhere until they get their fix. So what this really illustrates is, what is the voice of an addiction inside an addict's head? It is, I am first. I am the addiction. I am running the show. So no, we're not going to go study. No, we're not going to go to class early. No, we're not going to stop at the library. We are going to stand here in line in the rain until I am served. Right? Am I right? That's an addiction. I am first. So somebody who might want to go back to school, but they're in food addiction, they're too brain fogged and too tired. So they might have the thought, oh, I'd love to go back to school, but the addiction says, no, we're not going back to school. You're way too tired and brain fogged to go back to school. Or maybe I'd like to get married. Well, if they're a food addict, we can get married. But if they're not, forget about it. So that is the voice of an addiction inside an addict's head. I am first. And this is an illustration of that. Affordability, you see pricing in sodas that is very similar to the pricing in cigarettes. You know, you didn't just buy one cigarette at a time, you bought 20. So they'd be in your pocket, so you could get one every 20 minutes. And you don't want to just sell somebody one soda. Even if you could, you would rather sell them for the same price 12 sodas. Now they're in their house. Now they're available. Now they're provoking those cravings. So the pricing on processed foods is very similar to the pricing on cigarettes. Dollar meals are just a joke. What dollar meals are is really a craving stimulator. Nobody ever buys a dollar meal on the way home and then doesn't eat anything else for the rest of the evening. The dollar meal will set off just hours and hours of cravings. So how does product formulation work with processed foods? Well, you start out with sugar. Now, sugar activates the dopamine pathway, which is the same pathway that's activated by dope. You have flour, which activates serotonin. You have gluten, excessive salt, and dairy, all of which have been shown to activate the opiate pathways. Same pathway that's activated by opium. You have processed fats, which actually activate the pathway, which is named after cannabis. It's the endocannabinoids. Just happens to be the same pathway. When researchers first started finding this, what they said, well, isn't that interesting that overeating is activating the addiction pathways? It's the other way around. The addictions settle in the same pathways as the addictive substances in food. Caffeine activates dopamine, and then you have food additives. So when you think about the tobacco mentality in terms of product formulation, you think about them soaking those tobacco leaves in a sugar solution to enhance the kind of accessibility of the nicotine. In fact, I'm reading Gary Taub's book, Case Against Sugar, right now. He makes the argument that without sugar, tobacco would never have been palatable and attractive or addictive. So there you have it. I mean, that's, you know, it's like an alcoholic who's also using meth, who's also using marijuana and cigarettes, maybe a little opium sprinkled in there. But this is called multi-use. It's a poly-use substance syndrome. And this is much harder to recover from because you just have all the pathways active. It's not just one, it's not just two, it's all four of the major pathways. Very hard to extinguish multi-use addictions. So how could this have become an epidemic? Well, so here you see these tobacco executives getting hold of the processed food industry in the 1980s, and what are they saying? Oh, we want a snack industry. And all of the snack people are looking around saying, people just are not hungry. They have their meals. They're not really interested in snacks. So hunger is not going to sell snacks. And the tobacco executive said, oh, desire could sell snacks. Desire could. And there's the shift. There's the shift from things that are sold on shelves in grocery stores, shifting from food to addictive substances. You're not activating hunger. You're not having anything to do with hunger. You're having to do with very intense cravings. Two very different phenomena. So here we go. Who did this? So there were actually specific individuals involved in this. One of them was Howard Moskowitz. So he's a PhD in the psychology of marketing at Harvard. And what he figured out was a method to maximize the amount of sugar in a product before the consumer would say, oh, that's too sweet. So he collected massive amounts of data, he tested and tested, and then he came up with this process to maximize the amount of sugar in a product. Now, what happens when that kind of a breakthrough occurs is that every food processor out there then is saddled with getting all the sugar content in all of their products. to maximum. So if they fail to do that, people will always choose the more sugary product. So they have to keep up. And Howard Moskowitz worked on hundreds of processed food products. Adam Janowski is not a neuromarketer, he is a researcher, and he found out that you can put as much fat as you like into a product, and consumers will never object. And the Monell Chemical Senses Center learned that you can teach salt addiction to children. So children are not born with a preference for salt, they are born with a preference for sugar, but you can teach them. If you put enough salt into children's products, they will learn salt addiction. And now you have the trifecta of food addiction. You have sugar, fat, salt, you have research, you have evidence that they're all addictive. So, the food industry knows that when you process foods, you take out taste, you take out appearance, texture is terrible, they're horrible. Once you've cooked and homogenized and pasteurized a product to the point where it can be put into a can or a package, it doesn't taste or look like anything. So you have to load it up with sugar, fat, and salt to give it taste and texture. And these are highly addictive combinations. So for a food processor, this is an absolute no-brainer. And they went after this addictive formulation with a vengeance. Did it work? Did it work? So what we have here is we have, again, I'm looking at the years 1970 to 1997. These data are typically not published. I had to dig down into the USDA minutiae statistics to put together these numbers. So this is the food industry. They don't want people to know this incredible volume of processed foods reaching our population. Sorry. So we have flour, we have caloric sweeteners, frozen potatoes for French fries, and high-fat dairy. Now, how addictive is sugar, really? Well, it only takes 7 days of feeding a rat a 30% solution of sugar water for that rat brain to start developing addictive manifestations. And it starts in the locomotion pathway. So the first thing the addiction goes for is, I want to make sure that this person can walk over and get this stuff before I get them addicted, right? Okay. Rats will choose sugar over cocaine and heroin. They will choose saccharin over cocaine and heroin. When you administer cocaine or sugar through a rat's nose, the sugar will reach the dopamine pathways faster and create a greater response than cocaine. Okay? Fried potatoes are like sugar sticks. You know, once you've treated that potato starch to very high temperatures, it's going to be absorbed more like sugar. And then you coat that French fry in sugar, salt, add fat, and you have like the perfect storm of an addictive substance. Dairy contains 4 natural opiates. So dairy is a substance that is designed to put a 100-pound baby calf to sleep. So it will absorb nutrients. And it does have an addictive impact on our brains too. So how did this all come out? Well, by 1997, Americans are consuming 1 pound per person per day of sugars, flours, and dairy, high-fat dairy. 37% increase over this 27-year period. So we see neuromarketing works incredibly well. And then we have these epidemics of consequences. So the way I think about this is, okay, we do have obesity, we do have diabetes, we do have high blood pressure, we have now cancer. These are all now considered to be part of the metabolic syndrome. But I think the driver in all of them is addictive foods. I mean, the core question that nobody ever really asks is, why did entire populations start picking up processed foods so often and in such great quantities that they made themselves incredibly sick? Nobody really asks that question, or if they do, it's like, well, they're lazy. Well, wait a minute. Did really 300 million people in the United States suddenly become lazy? I don't think so. Oh, they're weak-willed. Really? I don't think so. So we just don't, we never, I mean, I think before we put this all together, we've never really understood how somebody could pick up a pound per person per day of sugars, flour, mostly gluten-containing flour, and high-fat dairy. So this is the addiction model. The addiction explains this very well. So what's happening in the brain? I think we're just going to whip through this. 4 things are happening. They're teaching the limbic system to crave, the stress pathway to stress, the frontal lobe to crash, and mirror neurons to copy. So how many of you have ever studied addictions, just in general? Okay, well, this is really good information. So the limbic system is where cravings come from. It's where you feel good, pleasure, reward. It's where you get cravings. And then as the addiction gets worse, it's where you get obsession. And then finally, the addiction is so running your life that you have the thought, I'm doing something I don't really want to be doing. It's because of all these alterations in the brain. Now, there is a stress pathway, the CRF, corticotropin releasing factor pathway. It sends out signals of worry. As it gets worse, you get chronic anxiety, stress, fear, panic, and stress eating. So, for example, when I was in business school, I would leave the campus. I would have to get a big bag of Doritos. Well, no, at that time it was Fritos. And the 16-ounce glass bottle of Dr. Pepper. I hope I'm not triggering anybody. And I would have to eat that and drink that before I could start the paper. That's stress eating. And that was, 1970s, so a long time ago. Now, what happens in the frontal lobe? You've got to take the braking system off. So when you teach the brain to crave, that's not enough. If the braking system is still saying, oh, I don't eat that, or my doctor told me not to eat that, or I'm not really hungry, you've got to take those thoughts away. So you've got to impair attention, learning, decision-making, memory, impulse control, satiation, and emotional processing. Those are all breaks. You've got to take them out. You certainly have to take away willpower. Now, mirror neurons, this is the key slide. This is the whole thing. If this is the only thing you remember, this will totally propel you into the top ranks of practitioners. Mirror neurons do one thing, is they get their human to survive. This is from primitive times. This is the part of the brain that says run when the tribe is running, hide, eat, look for food. Whatever the tribe is doing, you do that. And if you do that, you will live. But if you get separated from your tribe, you will die. Now, this is a very powerful part of the brain. You got to remember that famine is the leading killer of humans on the planet for all times. So fear of famine is going to run a lot of the brain. So here's where the processed food neuromarketers come in. They say, oh, eat the processed foods that everybody is eating. So they're going to put lots of images in front of their consumers of people eating processed foods. Okay, just a brief review. Food neurostimulation is availability, advertising, cueing, removing price and availability barriers, and focusing on children. Now, what happens normally when you get this neurostimulation? Normally, the limbic system says, "Ee, that looks really good." But it goes over and checks it out with the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe says, no. Okay. But when you get a lot of neurostimulation, and it just goes on and on, the limbic system starts to draw the blood supply from the rest of the brain, and when the message goes over to the frontal lobe, oh, should we have this? The frontal lobe does not have enough blood supply to answer. That is loss of braking system. So craving pathway says, oh, could we have this? Could we have this? Could we please have this? Could we have this? And the frontal lobe says, oh, we can have it. I don't hear anything. Okay, let's go get it. That's what starts to happen in the brain. Now, there's another system that is kind of getting alarmed here. That is the stress system. And that system is saying, something's wrong here. But ironically, that system aggravates cravings. So you see this, the beginning of this cycle where I shouldn't eat that. Oh, but you're so stressed out, go ahead and eat it. Okay, I'll eat it. So you have the stress pathway actually aggravating the limbic system. Frontal lobe, not online. You have dieting, which aggravates it, because dieting is mostly about not enough food. And again, that creates fear of famine. Reduced calorie dieting, fasting, all those things actually make food addiction worse by increasing the fear of famine. Now, here come the mirror neurons. Food neurostimulation definitely wakes up mirror neurons. Oh, everybody's eating food, so that aggravates the limbic system further. And eventually what you have here is you have what I call the Bermuda Triangle of food addiction. And this is actually going on in any addiction. You have the mirror neurons, you have the limbic system, you have the stress system, all screaming, eat, eat. It's easy to get. It's very cheap. Everybody else is doing it. Do it, do it, do it, do it. And as you know, we just talked about how the addiction is always first. I'm first. That is how you develop these metabolic diseases. The addiction says, well, I don't care about metabolic diseases. I'm first. I want that. We're getting that. So whole lives, the whole middle section of the textbook is about what disappears into this Bermuda Triangle of addiction. Because you just can't really think clearly without a frontal lobe. You can't make decisions and move ahead in life without a frontal lobe. Now, there's another really nasty consequence of this, which is called thought fusion. It's when the stress pathway and the craving pathways are firing constantly. And it sounds like this. It sounds like, oh, I don't want to eat that because I'm really not going to bed. Okay, well, I'll just have one bite because I am really hungry and I don't want to. Oh my goodness, I ate the whole thing, but I didn't want to. When I'm going to have to go to the grocery store, I have to replace that. And I think, oh, I'll get another one for myself too because I don't want anybody to see that I'm doing this. I'm such a slob. I hate myself. I hope nobody saw that. That's what it sounds like inside the head of a processed food addict all day. They wake up, I'm going to be good today. And by 10 o'clock, they've had their first binge. Now, you guys are getting these amazing educations. And you are learning all the things that people should eat. But when you get all your materials together and you say, wow, I'm really ready to help somebody. I got this whole notebook for them, my first client, my first day. I'm going to teach them about all these things. And you're just like, you're like, I'm ready. So I have a good idea for you. It's eat clean. But you saw where that eat clean goes. It just sinks into that frontal lobe. And you're talking about omegas and nutrition, and the client is thinking, well, I saw that really good pastry shop on my way in here. I'm going to stop there when I get it. I'm going to get 3 of those, and I'm going to get 4 of those. Because last time I only got 2 of it. They can't listen. They can't hear. Now, the tragedy of this is that a food addict needs to learn a lot. So they need to avoid all these triggerings, their relationships need to be, processed foods are at the center of everything, every aspect of life. But their frontal lobe has crashed. the mirror neurons. We are going to flip the mirror neurons from the neuromarketer's gain to our client's gain. So if Robert Mueller can flip witnesses, we can flip neurons. We're going to do this. So when you have done this, when you have flipped mirror neurons, food neurostimulation is aimed at these people, but instead of saying, oh gosh, that looks really good, when your mirror neurons have been flipped to your gain, the message that comes across the brain is, are you kidding? My tribe doesn't eat that. So this is a very new message. It's identification with a group of people who don't eat this stuff, and so I am not eating it. However, mirror neurons are very fickle. They will always be copying. That's what mirror neurons do. They're a fierce part of the brain, and they're turned on all the time. Those mirror neurons are constantly scanning. What is everybody doing? Are they running? Are they hiding? Are they looking for food? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? So they're always going to be persuaded to some degree. You can train them by the last group of people they saw. So you've got to help these people for a lifetime. We live in a culture which is saturated with processed food stimulation. And we, as practitioners, although I'm a researcher more than a practitioner, we have to not mess around with this. We have to give them support for a lifetime. It's not like 1 hour a week they can come in and they're going to be okay. No, it's not that kind of a condition. So if your clients around people who are not eating processed food and they're vibrant and they're energetic, then they will be creating health. Those mirror neurons will be fighting for health. But if clients around people who are eating processed foods, like most workplaces, talking about their medical procedures and their pharmaceuticals, then those mirror neurons are going to be creating disease. I'm not going to be comfortable if I don't have any medical procedures and everybody else does medical procedures. So that's what mirror neurons do. They are always driving conformance. So you've got to find them a healthy tribe. And that healthy tribe has to be more than 5 people. We are more stimulated by people we know well. We are more stimulated if that person is doing something that we've done a lot of. And we're more stimulated if it's something about food. So these are the factors that activate mirror neurons the most. How in the world are you going to do that? So, first of all, you have to stop thinking in old terms of overeating. We're not fighting overeating. It's not that clients don't make it because they lack willpower, or because they're gluttonous, or because they haven't hit bottom, or because they're lazy, or because they have childhood issues. Clients don't get started, or they quit, or they lapse because they have gotten the wrong diagnosis, possibly. Because dieting is not a fix for an addiction. Like if you have a client who comes in and they're a beer drinker and they've got a big gut and they've accumulated a lot of fat, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm not too worried about the beer, but let's work on weight. No, you've got to address the alcohol. So dieting is not a match for this disease. Maybe clients need a lot more support. This is equivalent to, and what I got out of the textbook is this is really equivalent to somebody who might need residential treatment. But we're not going to give a couple 100 million people residential treatment, and it doesn't work. People come home and they lapse. So what's next best? It's an intensive outpatient program. You would go to a hospital for half a day, frequently, every day, for years maybe, for a year. So that is the level of support that people need. And maybe they have cognitive impairments. They cannot learn. They can't learn, but they can copy. And maybe they have these kidnapped mirror So just remember, it's not the client's fault. Either you are going to protect or restore, or the neuromarketer is going to be stimulating. For clients, they've got to find a band of health warriors and hang with them. But for you as a practitioner, remember that diet is only about 20% of recovery. It's really important to set up these online support groups. Relapse is normal. You can give new hope to people who have failed in the past. Always, always, always remember it's not the client's fault. And this is a great way to create an income for a practice, is to have an online community where you charge $30 or $40 a month, and it just comes in. It's not something that you have to remarket, like a new nutrition client again and again. And this is how you become a winner. And that's it. That's what I got. I am not sure about time. Do we have, I think we're going until 1:15. So we have 20 minutes for questions. Go ahead.
I'm Lisa Vasilakis, not just incredibly disturbing article over the weekend, where it said that women are fatter than men. Women, we already know they have as many heart attacks and they die of heart disease as often as men do. They smoke more. They are starting to have lung cancer at an earlier age. Are women more addiction prone than men?
Yes, yes, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because I have thought about this a lot. Women historically have been in these provocative environments much more. So they're the ones who spend more time being provoked in grocery stores. And remember, every bit of neurostimulation is teaching those craving pathways to crave, to be hyperactive. So they spend more time around food to start with. I think there's another factor, which is that when they're pregnant, they're extra, extra hungry. So addictions need repeat exposure in order to be established. And I think what happens is during pregnancies, they just get a lot more processed foods, and it gives the addiction a toehold, a foundation. Yeah. And then they're at home more. So their kitchens are become stimulating environments. They might be watching television more. They might have the opportunity to be stimulated by television more. So it just all combines. They are more subject. Like men smoked a lot more than women at the beginning because the advertising was targeted towards men. You were only a man if you smoked such and such a cigarette. And then gradually they got around to the women and church and their slims. Because I think that's why the men smoked more in the beginning and then women caught up. Now I think women are smoking as a means to fight the food addiction. They're smoking to try to keep their weight down. It's a really good question. Thank you. Go ahead.
You had a chapter in your textbook about mindfulness practices for eating. What do you think about that in terms of its effectiveness and maybe applying it to working with children?
Yeah, really good question. So the question is about the mindfulness chapter in the book and how it might apply to children and how it might apply to food addiction. So we know that mindfulness is one of about, I would say, at least 30 methods for calming the brain. Working a jigsaw puzzle is also brain calming. Listening to nice music, calm music, is brain calming. Going for a walk, being out in nature, reading uplifting material, being in a group of healthy people. But mindfulness by itself, in my opinion, will not stop the suffering. It will not stop the compulsive eating by itself. You really have to have a clean food plan. I mean, this is an addiction. It's a substance addiction. So you really do have to get the addictive substances out. And then you have to work on the cueing, the stimulation. And then you have to get those mirror neurons under control. So mindfulness enough is just not enough. So just like if you said to a raging alcoholic, oh, let's just be present and really think about how much alcohol we're drinking. No. You gotta get off the alcohol. at some point. And then surround that alcoholic with healthy people. This is the Alcoholics Anonymous model. You know, they're just like, okay, alcoholism, you gotta go to a meeting every day for your first 90 days. If you start into recovery when you're 17, you're still in recovery at 87. I mean, you have AAers with 60 years of recovery. That's the model that we're working on here. Does that help? Okay.
I guess my main thing about with children is because there's so much modeling from their home environment.
Yes.
And I know that that's a big issue.
That was the second part of your question.
Right.
And there is a chapter in the book, and I think this is the only academic material on children, food addicts. You have to get the adults in the house cleaned up. And then that's education, even if somebody doesn't think they're addicted, these are still really harmful substances. And the parents can educate the children to some extent, but the parents control the supply. And the parents control the mirror neurons. The parents control the smell in the house. Like I tell people, you know, they say, well, I don't want to try to control my children. No, that's codependency and trying to control something you can't control. But what you can do is you can fill your house with the smell of clean food, unprocessed, non-addictive foods. You can put clean foods out on the kitchen counter. Any processed foods that some adult is demanding be available to them, that has to go locked in the trunk of their car. That can't come in the house. And then your children only ever see me eat clean food. It's very powerful identification. So there are definitely strategies for children, but it's not like you're going to take the children to the doctor. You're not going to take the children to Weight Watchers. This is a very comprehensive disease, and it needs a really detailed, from the foundation up, environmental attack approach. Yeah, two excellent questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Have there been any numbers regarding the number of commercials kids see now with the advent of streaming services like Netflix, where you don't see commercials?
Oh, you know, what the neuromarketers have done is they've captured children on the internet. So it's really amazing what they will sync to. So, for example, they'll follow children around from site to site, and if a child puts in information in one place, then when that child goes to another website, that cartoon character already calls them by name. It's really diabolical. There are things called adver games. So there are games that involve food. McDonald's adver games, where you play games with these characters. Or you meet them. They have their own Facebook pages. You can meet them and talk to them. And the M&Ms will talk back. And they're your friends. So the whole business of isolating food addicts, they're already tending to isolate because the stigmatization from the culture is really severe. So they already don't want to go out. If they happen to be a food addict who has accumulated fat tissue. They're there with their cartoon characters. They're there with, with television friends. So it's not just in the commercials. You see Disney characters, for example, who advertise products. So the child becomes familiar with and friendly to. Mirror neurons remember, oh, that's my friend. And then they see that that friend is eating this processed food. It's pretty bad. Yeah, there's some great books on this, the commercialization of children in the U.S., but it's, even things like the Captain Crunch cartoon, where the bad babysitter is coming, the one that they don't like. And then they're being coached in the cartoon how to overcome the bad babysitter who will not let them have sugar. They're coached on how to nag their parents. This is comprehensive and insidious. Yeah.
David and Goliath sounds like a good description of your approach. You have Goliath with a lot of means and a lot of power. And so how is David going to win this one?
Thank you for that really excellent question. So this is where the business model comes in. This is a business that we're fighting, and I have this model for an online support system. I offer 2 hours a day of video chat, live video chat. I'm on with them. I'm a peer support person. I don't have a license to do anything at all. I'm a researcher, so I'm there as a peer support person. Somebody with a therapy background or a nutrition background or any kind of a medical background would be able to do this under their license as a group therapy. Insurance companies are increasingly paying for this, but it's a model. We have 2 hours of live video chat with me on, and then an hour in the evening of conference call. In between, we have a Facebook secret group. We have a Facebook private messenger group. We send out 6 emails a day, summarizing the events and sending out reminders. And we record the evening conference call so that we have like 1,000 of them. We've been doing that for a while. So people can choose recovery stimulation at any moment. So we now have a model that works. So until we had this, and I beta tested it all last year, just shocked at how well it works. So one idea is to get practitioners to sign up and become a licensee for this model, where we provide a lot of the programming. They don't have to be on 3 hours a day. And they go into their lists of people. Everybody's got these email lists with thousands of people on them. And they recruit them into these groups so that people have access to recovery stimulation throughout the day. So I think you can put about 125 people into one of these groups before you lose the good eye-to-eye neuron engagement. But this is something that works. This is the first thing I've ever seen that actually worked. So that's one idea. The other idea is to go through faith organizations, which historically have picked up the slack when there's a national epidemic that the health industry can't handle. So they picked up the slack on sexually transmitted diseases, on addictions, on AIDS. You know, they have the support groups in their faith organizations. So I did my doctoral dissertation work in a faith organization in Houston. It worked great. Took 2 years of education, gentle education. But by the end of there's really powerful mirror-neuron engagement and identification in a faith organization. So that worked great. I don't know if it's stuck. I was there for 2 years, just doing gentle education, but they all tried it. You know, it's like, oh, my church is doing this. I'm going to do this too, so where's the food plan? It wasn't any persuading. It was already, the mirror neurons were already engaged. So finding existing organizations where there's already pretty intense mirror neuron engagement, that's my second idea. My third idea is the wellness corporations that provide services to corporations. So that, I have a good background for that because I have the MBA, I worked in a corporation. My father was a biochemist for a consumer goods corporation for his entire career. I'm corporately oriented. I'm comfortable in that environment. I think attaching these services to the wellness corporations that are providing services to corporations, workplaces, I think that's another idea. But what I really think is going to make the greatest difference is Touro. I'm not kidding. And you guys are the first medical school ever anywhere to invite a speaker on food addiction. And I think putting these discrete modules into existing courses. I don't think you need a whole course on this, but I think just, breaking down bits of the textbook and incorporating it into existing courses so that as this group of practitioners reaches the market, they're prepared. They know why they need an online support function. And the main practitioner does not have to run it. It could be a nurse. It could be a health coach. Because the idea here is that we will provide enough programming that somebody else could be on for an hour a day. But somebody who knows those 125 people and has the mirror neuron identification. You think any of that will work?
It's a big bet. It's a tough fight to, it's a very overwhelming power and money on the other side. So
yeah, it's got to be grassroots. It's got to be, and we see it happening already. Kraft, for example, is in financial trouble. People are just stopping buying that stuff. It's already started. I don't know if they're substituting something else. The other thing that's very hard about food addiction is the last addiction. So all the drug and alcohol addiction treatment really, honestly, at a core, it shifts the person off those drugs and onto processed foods. So we're the only recovery effort that shifts people off all substances and onto mindfulness and jigsaw puzzles and taking a walk and 3 hours a day of live contact. And we're really, really profoundly training that brain not to go to substances at moments of stress. But yeah. But I tell you, the fact, it's Zoom technology. When I got my first look at Zoom technology over a year ago, I said, oh, we might have a chance. It's very easy to use, it's very clear, it's very effective. I ran a group at 8 o'clock this morning and super easy to use. Super easy to use, and you get everybody's face on the screen. So the mirror neuron that says, well, really, are there enough people that I should be copying these people? The answer is yes. Okay, I do. I see enough people, and what are they doing? What are they talking about? Oh, going for a walk? Okay, well, we'll go for a walk. It's like sleepwalking. It's like, okay, are they doing that? Okay, I'm going to do that. It's just like sleepwalking. I'll give you an example. So the first day we did this, we had a home. It was called the Home Addiction Reset Program, the HARP. And there were people who came on. We left the screen open all day. It's cheap. It's $14.99 a month just to open the screen. So people came on in the morning and said, well, I'm really afraid of giving up processed foods because they're my only friend. I said, well, then don't do it. Today, just hang out with us. Well, I don't want to weigh and measure my food because it makes me think of dieting, and then I think I don't have enough. So I don't think okay, that's okay, don't weigh and measure today. It's just day one. Just hang out. So by the end of the day, well, I had my first clean day. You did what? Well, I measured, wait, you didn't measure my food today. You did what? These are people who have been stuck. I know this is what I need to do. I can't do it. And at the end of one day, people sitting on their sofas, my neighbor, gossip. It's called talk grooming. But the other really cool thing was that I realized we're looking at their den. We're seeing them in their kitchen. It feels like they live next door. Because that's the only other way I would see their den and their kitchen. And so by the end of the day, I really had this neighborhoody kind of feeling. And that's where people conform. That's where people, oh, they're doing that? Oh, look, that hat is in style. I'm going to go get that hat. It's just gorgeous. After years of trying to teach them through this broken frontal lobe, just to be able to show them a group of people. Oh, you're having soup for today? Oh, I can make that. I have those ingredients. I'm going to go make soup. Like that. Just that easy. It's amazing. But they do need 3 hours a day. I tried the once a day conference call. That was not enough. You think, they're 167 hours in a week. even 3 hours a day was not enough for some. Like we did 3 hours a day all last year. We didn't try the whole day long thing again. And then we came to the end of the year and I said, well, so these are existing members and they're doing great. I said, would any of you like to do this whole day thing again? And they said, yeah, we would. Like, okay, we're going to do it. So we did it for a couple of days and I asked them, I said, well, what is it about this whole day thing that you especially like? I don't have to decide what to do. So the thing that processed food does is it takes up all your time and attention. You're either eating, you're going to get food, you're eating it, you're sleeping it off, or you're watching TV because you're too brain fogged to do anything else. So they literally, you know, frontal lobe's not really working yet. You got to do a lot of brain training to get that frontal lobe to work again. They were literally having a hard time figuring out what to do with their time. So, you know, okay, this is exercise hour. Here are these videos, or go take a walk. Okay. This is do a puzzle hour. So get a puzzle going and listen to a calming book or some music. Oh, it's puzzle hour. Okay. It's lunchtime now. Oh yeah, I know what I'm going to have for lunch. They needed that. They needed that kind of support. And the cool thing about doing it over Zoom is that you're in their home. They're in their home. So gradually the home stops being a major relapse trigger, because place triggers are very powerful. Gradually it becomes a recovery trigger. And people will start to say, well, I was out and I was driving past a fast food place, but I knew I had food at home. I knew if I could just get home, I would be okay. Now that's not always been the case. It's been the case where I was just going to pick some stuff and then I'll eat it at home where nobody can see me. So you're gradually making that home a safe place. It's no longer a trigger for using. It becomes a trigger for safety. It's there are a lot of cool things about it. But I think the most important thing is to know we have something that works reliably. Yeah, go ahead.
In your group, how many people were like working full time, or are these all people who have all this free time?
No, this is a really good question. So the question is, what about people who are working full time? They don't have 3 hours a day. But what they can do is they can turn the screen on so they see everybody's face. They hear the voices. They turn the volume way down and they try to schedule their days so that they're doing something like answering emails, a low demand kind of activity. And that murmur in the background is enough to keep reminding those mirror neurons, this is my tribe, this is what we eat. And that is actually working. They're not talking, and the camera's not on them. So you can turn that off on Zoom. But they are getting that recovery stimulation. It's very cool. And then, of course, they're checking Facebook in between the video chats. They're on the private message chat. They're reading the emails we send them. So they're constant reminders. And no matter what time they leave work, they can start a conference call replay. Now, the road is a very dangerous place. There's just lots of opportunities and lots of stimulation. But if they have a recording of their tribe going in the car, then they're focused on that. They don't see. The relapse stimulation is blocked. So we have had to think through these busy days. Women with children at home. Turn off the microphone. The children just think that's so cool. Look, this is TV, and they wave back. You know, so the children can also be included. This is another method for including children. Yeah, and we know their names, and we say, hi, thank you. Everybody, 20 people, hi, they love that. And so the children will identify. It's very cool stuff. One more question.
I was wondering about working with underserved populations.
Oh, thank
people
you.
of color.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these resources sound like they're very accessible to sort of middle and high income families, but families that don't have access to internet at home or have Zoom laptops where they can access
cell phones. So you can get Zoom over cell phones, but I'm not giving you a perfect answer because the cell phone usage on Zoom requires a lot of data. Okay. You can call into Zoom so that you're not on the screen at all, but we know that it's the eye-to-eye contact that is the game changer. So my big idea is to go through the faith organizations. I saw that worked perfectly in the little Presbyterian church in South Houston. That was an unusual congregation. There were all different kinds of people in there, and they all got it. It took 2 years for it to really spread around, but you'd hear people saying, you know, my knees don't hurt anymore. What? My knees don't hurt anymore. Really? I gotta try this. You know, so that's how it spread in that environment, but all mirror neuron engagement. So I know, so that model, the faith organization model, is it's even better than anything else because all those organizations have licensed kitchens and they all have volunteers. And they could easily get in there twice a week and make the meals. The ingredients are cheap. You know, this whole thing of eating healthy is expensive. That is a neuromarketer urban myth. This way of eating is very cheap because you don't have medical expenses. You know, the food is cheap to start with, and you have the energy to go do free things, you know, rather than pay for cable and things like that. So I think that it would be very easy to organize a faith organization, to get a bunch of volunteers to go in there twice a week and make meals that people could pick up for $1 or $2. I mean, those are real dollar meals. And the cost of especially if they brought their own containers, you would avoid the cost of the containers, and you could provide those meals for $1 or $2. Yeah.
Just to follow up, Mount Diablo High School has a program. It's a culinary teaching program, but they're actually cooking for a lot of the students. They're cooking for the football teams now, and the meals are all free. They're getting support from various sources, but it's being done in the schools too, if you have the right leader there.
It does. It takes the right person. I just moved to Seattle last year, and after visiting a lot of faith organizations, I have settled on one. And the leader of that organization has I guess he does this for all of his new members, but he's asked me to come and talk to him. And I am going to propose that I try to replicate my doctoral work, internship work there, with a really gentle, low-key, passive education program, and then just let it filter through. It's a very interesting congregation. There are a lot of elderly, not well-off people, and then some young families, not a lot, but interested. So I'll see if he responds. But what I'm really interested in is they house a homeless population. So overnight, homeless people come and stay overnight in the church, and then once a month, parishioners are invited to come to a dinner with the homeless population of women. I think most homeless people are there because of the mental illness consequences of processed foods. Depression, confusion, rage, and then the physical illnesses. And I just think that if I could ever get a population like that, I think there are 40 women involved there, and get the church to make them clean meals every day, I know a lot of them would just kind of wake up and say, well, I could do this job. And the processed foods just squash people. And they're there. Like the group I have right now, we actually have a special rate for people who are on assistance. It's we just raised it to $24 a month. But that's the other cool thing about this model. You can have 125 people. You're not charging them very much per month, but because you have 125, you can make an extra $4,000 or $5,000 a month gross revenue. Part of that's going to come back to us for the programming that we provide. It doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, Weight Watchers is like $60 a month. That's expensive. That's way out of most people's range. But $24 a month, they're going to save that much on their food and medical costs. So even for a very low-income person, this is still economically feasible on a private basis. But through a faith organization, yeah, no problem. I have a model for it. Got to find the right leaders, just what Wolfram said. You have the right people who can actually carry it off. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all very much.